South Africa is preparing to diversify its export markets. This in response to the looming 30% tariff imposed by the United States of America. Government officials say this will cost jobs and shave 0.2% off economic growth. The country is one of several facing punitive tariffs from the U.S. as it moves to protect its own manufacturers and labor force. President Donald Trump announced the tariffs in April, but delayed them for 90 days to allow countries to negotiate better deals. Let's chat now to the manager of the fruit desk at Agbiz, and that's Wolfe Braude. A very good afternoon to you, Wolfe. Thanks very much for your time. We were told yesterday, I think the figure was 30%. Of people who stand to lose their jobs as a result of the U.S. actions. Any idea or sense from your part that on the part of specifically your area, I mean, how many people stand to lose jobs?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to chat to you, and I wish it was on a more positive topic, yes, it's a bit hard to tell exactly because, for example, within different commodities, within wine, macadamias, citrus, the other fruit commodities, it depends, or especially within fruit, it depends if the grower is exporting totally to the US or to other markets. It also depends on where in the growing season they fit. There are some fruit varieties that have already gone off to the States in terms of citrus, some that are now going to get interrupted, and some that are still coming. Towards the end of the year, we get grapes and deciduous fruit, which means plums, apricots, apples, and pears. So, for example, the impact on the apples, pears, plums, or apricots, that we don't know yet, and the grapes, that will have to still be calculated. And for citrus, we've probably managed to get at least about 60 to 70% of the season across to the US. So we're calculating at the moment. It is hard to say.
Now, I mean, but how big is the US market overall? I mean, for you compared to other markets?
Well, fortunately, when it comes to overall South African agriculture, the US market is only about 4% of our agricultural exports. However, it does vary considerably within commodities. So, for example, with citrus, it jumps to about 6%. And then if you take it even further down to Western Cape level, it jumps to about 20% of Western Cape citrus goes to the States, because we have a protocol with the Americans where they only allow us to export from the Western and Northern Cape. We actually hope to revise that protocol as part of the negotiations, and we also hoped to get access for avocado pears finally into the US, because both those protocols have been sitting on the desk of the USTR for a few years now. All the work has been done from the South African side. But unfortunately, it does not appear as if these negotiations are following the path of our experiences with the EU, with the UK, with African, South American negotiations. The two-way street is not really evident, and that is very unfortunate. But with other products such as macadamias, there's a much higher exposure, about over 35%. You've got with fruit juice about 14%. Grapes, fortunately, only about 3%. But of course, for exporters who are directly tied to US customers, that's a problem.
Now, the question then becomes, if, as the government is urging, and from what we're told yesterday by the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as his international relations counterpart, we should now be looking to diversify. How easy and how quick do you think that is going to be? And I don't know, but at what cost even?
Yeah, Vuyo, that's a very good question, because that diversification is different from sector to sector within the economy. So for agriculture, we have the problem that some of the commodities are more perishable. So fruit obviously has got a much shorter shelf or container life than grains, for example, or wine, which can be packaged and bottled. And the problem is, well, especially for agricultural products that are fresh produce, consumers have a particular taste or preference. So you'll find in different markets there's different sizes of oranges, different colors of oranges and apples and etc. that are preferred. And firstly, you must have permission in terms of plant disease regulations to be in that market. But secondly, in that we're usually in those other markets already, and the price balance has been carefully worked out in terms of supply and demand over years of trying to get into that market or being in that market. So you can't just flood products into that market, like for example the EU. We can't just redivert our US supply into the EU because the price will decrease substantially. Which harms then our existing South African EU exports and will set off a very unpleasant confrontation with some of the other suppliers of fruit into the EU. And in the Asian market, we've had some fantastic breakthroughs recently in terms of fruit and also other agricultural products going to Asia, red meat into Saudi Arabia, as well for Middle East. But the problem is those are recent breakthroughs largely, India, China, Japan for avos. So we're finding that those markets are still being established. You've got consumer preferences, buyer relationships, etc. When we've asked our members how long it takes, because government asks us how can we diversify, what's the speed at which we can diversify, and for those agricultural products we need about a year to two, 1 to 2 seasons to really set up the pipeline, the relationships, etc. So it is very problematic. Some commodities have more options than others. With citrus, for example, you could attempt some juicing because the juice prices are still fairly high, but it's a problem. It is a big problem.
So it won't really be that easy to diversify. Now, just on you said that the conversations with the Americans aren't following the two-way street that they follow elsewhere. Do you feel so? There's probably very little that anyone could have done with regards to that one, but do you get a sense that perhaps if we're a little more proactive or we could have achieved something perhaps a little earlier, or do you think that it is what it is? We're dealing with a different person or people here, so there perhaps isn't much that we could have done given how these people have tended, the Americans that is, have tended to sort of approach this whole matter?
I think that to some extent, we could have perhaps had some more time to consider scenarios for adding value, but not really, because like I said, this is a very unusual way to negotiate, if that's even the right term for what we're experiencing here. And this is not just basing it on the South African experience. If you look at other countries and other recent experiences in the last few weeks and months, you look at the Vietnamese, they gave extremely generous market access to the Americans. The Philippines, who are a very close American ally from way back to World War II, in fact, they involved in some skirmishes with China around fishing rights and South China Sea. So they're a key strategic ally. They still got 19%. There's some very generous offers of market access. Japan offered market access for rice, which is almost unheard of for Japan, and they still got a tariff of over 10%. And the new floor for tariffs seems to be 15%. You don't see anybody getting 10% anymore. You even find Switzerland got zapped with 39% just yesterday or the day before. And Switzerland felt that it made a generous offer. And Switzerland, in fact, is the sixth or seventh largest investor in the US globally. And I mean, we by no means have that type of cash to put on the table, all those type of investments in the States. We have investments. We have a significant amount of two-way trade. But yes, there is the sense that this is focused on rebalancing trade from the American perspective. And so unfortunately for countries even wealthier than us, it is very much about what's your deficit with the US and what can be done about that. Now, for example, just to take it back to agriculture, some of our deficit is because of counter-seasonal products. So we export agricultural products when they cannot grow them, specifically fruits, other fresh produce. Now, that's not because we are being bad or we're guilty. It's just climate. If it wasn't South Africa supplying that winter market in the US, it would be other Southern Hemisphere warmer countries supplying the US. So to factor that into the deficit or the agricultural trade imbalance is, we feel, not really a fair position, so to speak. But yeah, I'm not really certain in the current doctrine of trade that is evident from the US side that we would have fared any better, because other parties with even perhaps deeper, more friendly, more lucrative ties with the US have had high tariffs.
Wolfe, let me thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. He's the manager of the fruit desk at Agbiz, as we continue to look at the impact of those US tariffs on South African fruit exports and other, of course, industries.